we've cut our pieces out of our fabric and our lining, before we start sewing we actually have to go through and mark everything. So all those little dots and notches and darts and pockets and little triangles we have to go through and mark on our fabric. So I'm actually going to use a couple different tools. We're going to use tracing paper and a tracing wheel, which I have a couple different ones. And I'll show you how to use the tracing paper in just a minute. And then I'm also going to use some like marking pencils and the blue disappearing marker. So So tracing paper basically is one of the big things we're going to use to transfer all of our marks. And it is, well, a piece of paper. And it comes in a bunch of different colors. This one had red, white, blue, orange, and yellow. And so what you do is I'm going to take a tracing wheel. I'm actually going to use this one. And you take your tracing paper and you put the color side towards your fabric. So you're going to put that face down, and then you take your tracing wheel and then you're just going to follow all of the lines that are on the pattern. And as you do that, it's going to transfer those lines onto the fabric. So we're just going to draw, and as we move it, we now have a line. So we're going to go through and do that on basically anywhere there is a line. Buttons, buttonholes, darts, pockets, notches, circles, triangles, everywhere. I don't think I mentioned this before, but we're doing all of these marks on the wrong side of our fabric. So I'll demonstrate on this front. So we're going to, there's actually a way to do both sides at once. You can take your tracing paper and put it face up. And then we're going to take another sheet, put it here. So now our color side is touching the wrong side of our fabric and the other wrong side of our fabric. And then we take our tracing wheel, and you don't have to press super hard, but the harder you press, the more apparent the line is going to be. So we need that line. We have a little circle, so I just kind of do an X. We have a buttonhole. And then once we take this off, we have all of those marks. So we need to do that for our darts and our pocket. The only thing we don't have to transfer is our grain line. That only matters when we're cutting it out. So I'm going to go through and transfer all of those marks. Now we're actually ready to start sewing. So step one is you're going to fuse your interfacing. So basically, since the pieces are so big, they're telling you to piece it, which is why there's this piece and this piece. And then it says to trim the corners of the interfacing, which I've never heard of before at all. But so since my fabric is so thick, I'm actually going to put in a clip of what it sounded like when I cut it.
Damn, boy!
I didn't realize how thick it was, so I'm actually not going to use interfacing at all, or else this would be the stiffest thing on the earth. So we're going to pretend like I interfaced all of it, and if your fabric is like a lighter weight or like a light to medium, I would still even interface it. Not sure why they're telling you to trim the corners, but if you feel like doing so, go ahead. I did want to mention one more thing when you're cutting and or marking. If you do decide to cut out the triangles, cut them out this way so they stick out as opposed to cutting them in. I've seen a lot of people where they cut this triangle out so it looks like you pulled a piece of pizza out, or so it's missing. That's going to weaken your garment and you won't be able to let it out almost at all because you cut that out. And even in the instructions it says cut out all the pieces using long even scissor strokes, cutting notches outward. So that's what the instructions say. So if you're gonna cut them out and not in. Our step 3 on here is to stitch the darts on the front, and it has a whole bunch of different numbers. They're for the different, actually they're for the different styles. So we are doing number 1. So we're gonna go ahead and stitch all of our darts in place. So we have our front piece and we have our darts marked out. So basically what we need to do is we have these 2 lines that come together as a point. We're gonna take our dart marks and we're gonna pinch them up like this. And we're going to pin alongside. And so that one I missed. So basically we're trying to line these up on top of each other and pin through the line on both sides. And we're going to do that all the way up to the top. One thing I do like to do is I put one going off at the end, because a lot of times your mark will disappear because it'll be right on the edge. So I know that I'm following that all the way to there. And then sometimes I'll even put one just over here just to hold that fabric in place without having a pin in the way. Now that it's pinned, we're basically just going to sew directly on that line. And once we get about a couple inches away from the point, we're going to stop and just stay there for a second. So there's a couple different ways to finish the end of a dart. A lot of places will tell you to get right to the end, don't backstitch, pull it out with your tails and tie them into a knot. One of the ways that I learned was instead to change your stitch length to a really small stitch, and you basically just run off of the edge, so it makes a whole bunch of tiny little stitches all the way to the end. That's what I'm going to do. You'll have a dart that looks like that, and you're going to repeat that for this one and the other front piece. The next thing it says to do once we have our darts stitched is to press them towards the center. So we're gonna take our dart, and I like to lay it flat first and press it the way we stitched it. And this is called a ham. It's a tailor's ham. It's used when pressing curves or darts or anything that's curvy that needs to be pressed. So we press them flat first, and the center is going to be where our buttonholes are. So we're going to take our vest front, lay it on our ham, and we're going to take our dart that's kind of like a flap now, and we're going to push it towards the center and press. And we're going to scooch it up and do the same. And we're going to repeat that on the other dart and the other front. It doesn't want to lay totally flat. Once you press it from the wrong side, you can also flip it over and make sure your little flaps are going the way they're supposed to, and press it from the right side. And steam is your friend, especially when working with wool. Our next step, once our darts are pressed, is we're going to start working on the lower pocket. So we're going to take our lower welt, which for me is piece number 2, and we're going to take our pins out. And what it wants us to do is take our right sides and fold them together. And on here there's a fold line. That fold line is basically just right in the middle. So if you just fold this up and line up your raw edges, it will be right in the middle. So we're going to fold this in half, and then it says to stitch the ends, so it's talking about the ends, which is the little short sides. So we're going to stitch from here to here and here to here. And if we actually go back to the first page, it tells us our seam allowance on everything is going to be 5/8 of an inch. There's a couple instances, I think on the belt it's 3/8, but it says unless otherwise indicated. So basically everything we're sewing on this is going to be at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once it's stitched, it says to trim, turn, press, and press. But before we flip it, it's always good to press it first. Pressing is always good, and basically half of sewing is ironing. So we're going to press in first. And then it says to trim. So what we're going to be doing is getting rid of a lot of this bulk that's in our corners. When we're trimming bulk from corners, basically we're going to cut off a triangle from here and here. And when we cut it, we want to cut as close to the stitching here as we can without cutting through it. So we're going to get as close as we can, and then we're going to repeat that on this side. Now we have to flip it. So we're going to take this guy. We're actually going to cut some of this off. We're going to flip him inside out. And there's a couple different ways to get these corners to look like really nice corners. They make a device called a point turner. It's basically something really pointy. And you take that and you use it to kind of push out the point. And then you'll get a nicer corner. This is really thick, so it doesn't want to totally turn. You can also use a pencil. I've also used a really small crochet hook. Basically anything to get in there to turn that point. And once you have them turned, you are going to take it back to your iron, and we're going to press it again. Then we are going to sew right like a 1/4 of an inch away from our raw edge, and we're going to baste these two layers together so it doesn't open. And basting just means we're going to make our stitched length really long. So I'm going to do like a 4.5 or a 5 stitch length along this. The marks for the pocket might make a little bit more sense now. They were all sorts of jagged before, but once we close the darts, it turns into basically a pocket box. So we have our welt, and we're going to attach it to the bottom of this box, but we have to do that on the front. So we're going to take this and flip it over, and our welt is going, this kind of angle end is going to go towards our side, and we have to line up this point and this point with the bottom corners of our box on this side. One way that I do that is I'll go back to this side and put a pin here and here, and then I will put a pin there, there. So when we flip it over, we can see the bottom corners. So we're going to take this and line up our stitching line with those corners. And kind of like the dart, we have to match up this line with that line. So I'll start by pinning it, and I'm actually directly on the line. So this stitching line is matching up with this bottom line. Once it's pinned, we're going to sew directly on top of this line. We have this stitched, and we're actually going to go in and again cut some of this away. We want this to be about 1/4, but we're only cutting through the welt. We're not cutting through the front. Our welt is on, so now we have to put our pocket bag in. So we're going to take that piece, and we need this one. Yes. So we're going to take this piece, and again we're matching up a whole bunch of lines. So we have a box here with this in the middle and a box here. So we're going to line this up so our boxes are the same and pin our sandwich together. We have our boxes lined up, and we're going to sew around this entire box, and we're going to be pivoting at our corners. We've stitched our box now, and we can see it's caught all of our layers. And now comes the very terrifying part. So if we look back here on this, it says slash, and we have this little triangle and this little triangle. So we're gonna slash along this line and make these little prongs in the corner. And we're gonna be doing that through all of the layers that we just stitched through, which is terrifying. So a lot of the times I will take this and start it. We're cutting through everything, through our darts. And again, like we did the welt, we want to get as close into the corner as we can. This is the magic part if we did it correctly, and I hope that we did. So we're going to turn this over. We're going to turn this over, and we're going to reach through all of this, and we're going to pull our whole pocket bag through. So right now we can see all the way through it, but we want this to fold all the way back. So sometimes it's helpful to take our welt and push it up, because that will force this back down this way. We have it pressed open like this, and then we're going to take our top half and we're going to fold him down, and these edges should match up, and then we're going to press that again. Right now we have a pocket bag, but if we put anything in our pocket, it's going to fall out. So we need to close our pocket bag. We're going to take this and peel him back. We have that little triangle that we left. We're going to stitch over that triangle, and we're going to stitch down through both layers of our pocket bag, up the other side, and catch our triangle that's sticking out over here. Once that's closed, the next instruction is to edge stitch. Basically that means stitching on the edge, but it is right on the edge of our welt, and it's going through the welt and the layer of this to close that. once you have this one done, you get to do all those steps over again on the other front. But now we have a nice welt pocket. So you're gonna, repeat all of those on the other piece.